Greetings of peace. My name is Rob Hotep, broadcasting on behalf of 13signsastrology.com. I'm doing this video on a topic that someone asked me to do a video on a long time ago, and I never covered the topic, and I'm trying to get back with people, so let's get right into it. This video is on the Nephilim. Who are the Nephilim? Now, the Nephilim have a pretty interesting story attached to them. Many people have covered the topic of the Nephilim, and the way that I'm going to basically tell the story, you've probably heard parts of the story before. Some parts of the story you may not have heard, but this is how the story of the Nephilim was told to me. Now, before I get into the story of the Nephilim, I want to first kind of like point out like how I got into researching the Nephilim, because it kind of hits home for me. Now, the Nephilim started out as being a topic that I found out about when I was about 4 years old. When I was 4 years old, I asked my mother, as I was reading the Bible, who the Nephilim were and who these sons of God were. Because in the Bible, it talks about the Nephilim and it calls them the sons of God. And it say that they mixed in with the daughters of men. And I was like, Mom, who are the Nephilim? And she said they were angels. And she was right. She was right. But at the time, that didn't do justice for me. Because I didn't realize the angels could have sex. And of course I couldn't voice my opinion and ask my mother all this because I was so young. But immediately, I was young, but I was pretty sharp, and I knew about sex at a really young age. And I'm like, the sons of God came into the daughters of men. And I'm like trying to figure out exactly what that meant. I think that's how it was worded in the translation I was reading. Something like that. Something like that. And I'm like, what exactly does that mean? The sons of God mixed in with the daughters of men. So, I put it to the back burner. I'm a kid. It's nothing I could do about it. But it bothered me because as a kid, I always wanted to understand God. Like, I always wanted to know, like, who is God? Where is God? Like, I always just had a lot of questions. And a lot of members of my family always looked at me as being really eccentric, bohemian type because of that. Because I just always had a lot of questions, but I was quiet though, so I didn't like bother anybody or upset the system. That was the thing with me. See, I just watched things. But when I would say something, when I would ask questions, and when I would do things, everybody knew I was different. They were like, Dad, Ra always got like these weird questions, these weird statements. He always just got something weird to say or whatever. So it's always been like that. And it's just because I would see things and ask questions about things, and then when I didn't really get the response, that I was looking for, and I'm like, it's something more to that. You're not giving me a total explanation. And my mother, she's the type of person that she never suppressed that eccentric, unique quality in me at all. It was just other members of my family that was like, man, he's weird. But my mother, she always understood that eccentric aspect of me, definitely always, and even nurtured it, and put me into things, programs and things like that, that she helped to nurture that aspect of me, definitely. So, definitely wasn't my mother, but it was just different members of my family would always see that part of me and be like, man, that's weird or whatever. So, and it was the same way with the Nephilim topic. So, I kind of put it to the back burner. And then later on, when I was about 16, I went to this Sunday school. And I wasn't into the church, keep in mind. I've never been like a church boy. My mother joined several churches, and I would go with her. And that's basically how it was or whatever. At this time, I was, kind of feeling guilty. You know how it is when you grow up with the Christian mentality. You might not go to church, but you still got that Christian mentality. You know how that is. Like, you feel guilty about things. And I was in the streets doing my thing. I'm not going to go into all of that here. But I was doing my thing at the time. And I might have been 16, but in my mind, I'm a man at this time. So I'm doing my thing in the streets or whatever. And I kind of feel guilty. So I want to go to church or whatever. So I'm like, cool, Mom, I go to Sunday school. So I went to Sunday school. I asked the pastor, he was teaching in Sunday school, about the Nephilim. Because I always wanted to know about it. I always asked people about it when I would go around with religious people. And I usually would get the same answers. And the pastor, he told me something different, though. He did tell me something different. What he told me was that these were the fallen angels. Because I would always hear angels. But then he said these were the fallen angels. And I was like, And he was like, there's different ranks of angels. And I didn't question that too much more after that, but that stuck with me. That stuck with me when that pastor told me that. It really stuck with me. I think his name was Pastor Wilson. Really stuck with me when he told me that or whatever. And that was back in my days coming up in Ohio. you know what I'm saying, and really stuck with me or whatever. I was about 16 at the time, so of course, you know, you hear something deep, you go back out in the streets after church, and you get to doing your thing, and that's what I did. But that stuck with me, and that leads me into the story of the Nephilim. The story of the Nephilim is dealing with the term Nephilim or Nephala. The term Nephilim means fallen. It means fallen in Hebrew. And when you research it and take it into the ET doctrine, the term, because a lot of words that are in Hebrew and a lot of words that are in Arabic are actually words that really were in the ET language. And they were carried over into the Arabic and into the Hebrew. And it's no different with the term Nephilim. The term Nephilim is a Hebrew term that goes into the ET doctrine and means something different. And in the ET doctrine, it's the name of their planet. But it became the fallen in the Hebrew doctrine because the Nephilim were those particular beings that fell in the Semitic tones, basically. This is when you're dealing with the Semitic tones. And the Nephilim became those beings that fell, or the fallen. That's what the term Nephilim means, the fallen ones, or to fall or to kill. That's basically what the term Nephilim means. And the reason for this is because the Nephilim became the fallen angels because they were kicked out of the council of, who you know is God, but really it's the council of Anu. And Anu is a council. It's not a one person. When you read about Anu in the Sumerian doctrine, and I'm going to do a video on Anu in depth, but Anu is a council, an Anu ship. And when you deal with the Nephilim, the Anu ship voted against to kick out this particular group of Nephilim and pushed them out of the council, and they became Nephilim. Their rank went down. They lowered their rank. Why? Because they disagreed. And it was a major disagreement with the council. And this is how the Nephilim got their name, because they felt as though they wanted to be independent and self-governing, and that beings should be autonomous, basically independent entities, that they should be able to govern themselves. And they shouldn't have to answer to no outside council. Everybody should be able to govern themselves. That's how they felt. And the council was set up in a way, and the universe is set up in a way to where you have to prove yourself and move up in degrees. It's set up in degrees. And the people in certain degrees over you, they're not really your superiors, but they have their status is higher than yours because they know more. It's based on knowledge. You see, but the Nephilim, they didn't really see it like that. They looked at it like, it's really, these people don't know more than us. It's just that they use their titles as far as the people that are a part of the Council of Anu. They just use their titles to make themselves into gods so that people will worship them. That's how they looked at it. So the Nephilim disagreed, and they basically got kicked out of the council and pushed out. And they became fallen. Their rank got pushed down. They became lower in dimensions. See, this took place on another dimension. This stuff that happened with the Nephilim. Before they became the Nephilim, this took place on a higher dimension. 6 dimensions and up. This took place on a 6th dimension and up, basically. And when they became the Nephilim, they were pushed down into the 5th dimension on down, into the 4th and 3rd dimensions. This is where they were. This is why they were called the fallen, because they fell in dimensions. They fell in dimensions. And they became Nephilims, and they moved to a planet called Nephala. Actually, it's called Nephala, and this is another way and term that links into the name Nephilim, because this became one of their planets. They were pushed into many planets, and they set up kingdom and dominionship in these dimensions for the time, before human beings, of course, the advent of human beings. And then that's when they got angry again, because they didn't like the fact that human beings were created, and, you know, they went to war with them too. But that's a whole other story or whatever. That's a whole other story or whatever, because there's different groups of human beings as well too. I mean, to point that out, I mean, you had the human beings that mixed in with the Nephilim, because the Nephilim mixed in with a group of Homo erectus, actually, Homo erectus beings. The Nephilim mixed in and created intelligent beings from mixing in with the Homo erectus beings, you see, when they came to planet Earth. Because when they came to planet Earth, they found Homo erectus already here, and they mixed in and created basically what you would call demigods or other gods or whatever, from a mixture of Nephilim and a mixture of Homo erectus. Now, at this time, these Nephilim were like 15, 20, 30, 40 feet tall, because when they got pushed out from the 6th dimension down into the 5th dimension, they got pushed down into more material type of dimensions. Because on the 5th and on the 4th dimension, on the 3rd dimension, you're dealing with matter. Now, the matter gets more exotic as you move up in dimensions, but you're still dealing with matter. So they got pushed into matter. You see, they were of a different energy form, and they got pushed into the matter shell or the matter form. So I hope you guys are following this, because this is the real story of the Nephilim. This is what really happened. So they're in the 4th, 5th, and 6th dimensions. They're tall, 30, 40 feet tall, some of them. You know what I'm saying? They come down to this planet. They mix in with the beings here on this planet, Homo erectus type of beings, and they create a somewhat intelligent being, even back then. This is before the projects of the Adama projects that I talk about in some of my other videos. To understand the Adama projects, you can go into more like the human origins. I got some videos on YouTube talking about the Adama project, so I'm not going to go into that here. But this was before even the Adama projects. The Nephilim came to this planet before the Anunnaki got here. That's basically what I'm pointing out. Before the angels that were sent, which is the other half of the council. You had the Nephilim, or the angels that fell and they became the fallen ones, that came to this planet first. And then you had the angels that were sent, or the Anunnaki, that came to this planet later. You see, they came to this planet later. So really, when you deal with it, this is why when you get into the ancient Egyptian doctrine, which I'll be getting into more, and you deal with Set. See, Set goes back to Satan. And Set is the oldest deity, male deity in ancient Egypt. Set is the oldest male deity in ancient Egypt. And I'm bringing that out because this is when you deal with the fact that Satan came to this planet first. You see, Satan came to this planet before God. And this really takes you into the Gnostic doctrine. And I'm not going to cover all of that here, and I don't want to confuse people, but for people that know where I'm going and know a little bit about the Gnostic doctrine and the demiurge and all of that, you can kind of follow what I'm talking about or whatever. So this is going into that. So really, when you start getting into God and Satan and all of that, it gets kind of confusing. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot of information. But basically, the Nephilim were the Satan aspect, or the Luciferian aspect. That's pretty much going into the same group. When you talk about Luciferians and Satanists, even though they're two separate groups, Luciferians and Satanists, they still came from they originated from the same group, which was the Nephilim. They originated from that group of Nephilim, the Luciferians and the Satanists. And they came to this planet, and they mixed in with the indigenous, a lot of the indigenous Homo erectus beings on this planet that were here before and that were intelligent, because the Homo erectus, even though they didn't speak, they still communicated with telepathy. They were more so controlled by nature, spirits, and the nature souls. You know what I'm saying? Which is something that a lot of people are not going to understand here. What I mean by that is that the Homo erectus more so functioned like the Homo erectus aspect of humans more so functioned like more of a on a soul group type of level. So you got different souls. You know what I'm saying? You got individual souls, you got soul groups. Animals function, I'm going to do a video on all of this, but animals function on the soul group level, meaning that they share a soul, and then some humans still function on a soul group level too. And then you got some humans that are now functioning on an individual soul. You see, so this is how the Homo erectus function. The Homo erectus, see, we now more so function on an individual soul type of level. The Homo erectus, they function on a soul group, meaning they shared a soul, and they function off of that soul. This is how like birds function off a soul group. For instance, this is why birds as a group know to move south at a certain time, because they're tapped into a soul group. It's more to it that scientists aren't telling you. They have a spiritual connection with a soul group. Animals do have souls, it's just their souls are different. You see, and this is how Homo erectus was set up. So they were tied into the soul group, but then when they started mixing in with the Nephilim and the fallen angels, see, the Nephilim have independent souls, and they introduced the independent soul, and they introduced I guess you could say, more of an intelligent aspect as far as communication and all of that's concerned to the Homo erectus. And they basically helped to speed up the evolution of human beings. The Nephilim, or the fallen angels, which were, some of them were reptilians, some of them were mammalians type of beings, like a lot of the deities that you see in ancient Egypt with the cat heads and the reptile type of deities and the bird heads and all of that. That's how the Nephilim looked, basically. Those type of beings or whatever, they basically mixed in or whatever with the Homo erectus type of beings, which were similar to a monkey or something like that, but not a monkey, but similar to a monkey. They mixed in with those beings and created weird type of beings that were partially intelligent. You know what I'm saying? As far as being able to speak and communicate and do things, because you got to remember, these were ETs that came from above and fallen, but they still had a lot of information. They may have been fallen as far as the council is concerned, but when they got here, they were millions of years ahead of the Homo erectus at the time or whatever when they first got here. So they set up shop on this planet. This was their stomping ground. They set up shop or whatever, and this is why a lot of the indigenous tribes still pay homage to the snake and the reptilian and the Naga serpents. We deal with like the Nagas and all that. All that's going back to the fallen Nephilim again. The Nagas, the serpents. That's talking about the Nephilim, or the Luciferians and the Satanists. All of that's basically talking about the same thing. And eventually the Anunnaki came. Now these were the angels that were sent. And it's important, even though we talk about the Nephilim here, I got to bring up the Anunnaki because it's a difference between Nephilim and Anunnaki. The Nephilim were the fallen that came from their planet and they got kicked out. And then the Anunnaki started to incarnate, and these particular angels were sent. So you had the fallen angels, and you had the sent angels and the fallen angels. The sent angels and the fallen angels, or whatever. The Nephilim and the Anunnaki. Satan, God. This is basically where it all comes from. You know what I'm saying? So it's how you want to look at it. So when someone's called a Satanist, they're just on this side. They're on this side, meaning that they're more so on an indigenous level. They're more so dealing with sexual freedom, tantric type of sexual experiences, and all that type of stuff. That Hindu doctrine, all that stuff that came from the Hindu doctrine. That's the aspect that's dealing with the free aspect, that everybody's their own being and should be able to control themselves, and everybody's a god within themselves. That's the Satanist aspect, actually, though. That's really where Satanism come from, because Satanism means that you worship no God above yourself, and you worship yourself as a material being, and that's where all of that stuff really comes from, or whatever. It comes from the Nephilim. They taught that. That was the first doctrine here on this planet, was the Satanist doctrine, and that's what I'm pointing out here on this video. And then the God aspect is when the Anunnaki came, and they taught it different. And that's when they set up the mystery schools and the Garden of Eden and put man into a controlled environment and said, no, man is not going to learn these sexual arts and learn how to free himself and learn astrology and all of this stuff. Man is going to have to move up in degrees to get that information. And that's the God aspect. And prove himself and be moral and clean and cleanse and be married and, you know what I'm saying, have a family and all of that type of, the noble principle aspect came through from the Anunnaki. And the other aspect of the free spirit aspect of you can do whatever you want to do or do it thou wilt, that type of doctrine came through from the Luciferians or the Nephilim, you see. So that's basically who the Nephilim are or whatever. They represent that. So even when you see people that vibrate off of that type of do it thou wilt type of information, and I'm just offering information biasly here. I'm not telling you that you should be the type of person to be like do it thou wilt. I'm not telling you that. I'm not telling you should be like the person that say move up in morals and degrees and get religious and all of that. I'm not telling you to go on that end either. It's up to you to decide which path you choose. And really, if you really are a master, you would choose to be in the middle. You would choose to be in the middle. But the whole do it thou wilt comes from that side. I'm just getting you to understand where doctrines come from. So people that subscribe to that side, they're up under that particular doctrine. As far as the do it thou wilt, they're up under that energy as far as when they work with the gods or whatever. When they say God and all that, they're working with the Nephilim side or whatever on the do it thou wilt. Even when they say that they're going to do what they want to do for themselves, they're still working with that serpent Kundalini energy, which is the Nephilim energy. When they say they want to have all the sex they want to have, you're still working with Kundalini energy with sex. So you're still working with the Nephilim even on that end. Now, on the Anunnaki end, as far as people that are more like religious and, you know, want to practice constraint and control, that came from when the Anunnaki set up the Garden of Eden and put man into a controlled environment. That's Anunnaki school. No, that came from those angels that were sent. Now, this same doctrine carries over into the cherubim and the seraphim. Still talking about the Nephilim. It's like now the Nephilim become the cherubim, and the gods or the higher angels become the seraphim. The seraphim are more noble or higher ranking than the cherubim, because the cherubim are the fallen. That's why they're lower, because they're the fallen. So that's still going back to the Nephilim again. So I hope that helps you guys to really understand it. You know what I'm saying? To really understand who the Nephilim are and how they are functioning here basically on this planet, and how they function here in our universe. They are renegades according to the Anunnaki. And according to the Anuship, they're renegades, and they're basically doing their own thing or whatever. And you know what I'm saying, pretty much they have their own thing set up. And you know, you have some groups of beings that work on that side, on the Luciferian side, and you have some group of beings that work on the Anuship side, and work through the side of councils and, you know, and ranks and doing things in degrees and things like that. So that's pretty much how it works, whatever. The Nephilim, they do have their own councils. I mean, they have order. I'm not saying they don't have order. They're structured. You know what I'm saying? They have orders if they don't agree with the galactic and the universal principles. A lot of those principles, as far as, when I say universal principles, as far as being submissive and doing things in ranks. They think that people can tap into and share the knowledge equally and rule over themselves. And it comes down to basically, with a lot of people, it's up to you what you decide, or what side you decide to side with, or maybe you just study the information from a biased point of view so that you can understand how humans got into this good and evil thing, because this is how we got into it. We humans got into this good and evil thing through the gods and siding with different gods. And those gods, when you side with one god, then the gods that you're against become the devil. So this is where the God and the devil come from, as far as that principle. You know what I'm saying? It's basically who you side with. So to a lot of Satanists, you know what I'm saying, the God of religion is really the devil. You see, and that's how they square it up, and that's where the information comes from. It's based on knowing the origins of these words and where they really come from, and knowing how these stories came about, and knowing what really is going on in the universe, and why God and devil descended down, where these terms came from, and why one would be classified as God or devil. It's about knowing that, and then siding and finding out which side you choose, or maybe knowing so that you don't choose any side. You remain biased and in the middle, which is the meditative, spiritual, universal way to remain centered. The third way. When you're in polarity consciousness, it looks like it's always this or that, but what they don't tell you is in polarity consciousness, it's always a middle principle. It's always a balancing principle. So when you have the scales, there's always a fulcrum or a balancing principle in the middle to balance out everything. So I hope this helped. Thank you guys for watching my channel. Until we meet again, I want to leave you guys in much love. Happy Mercury retrograde to everybody. Much meditations, spiritual enlightenment to everybody, and ascension to everybody. Until we meet again, peace.